Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we are stepping into something that might feel small, but it changes everything when you speak English. I'm talking about that elusive, natural-sounding flow, conversational tone. You know the kind, where English doesn't sound like a textbook anymore, but like something alive, where words feel easy, rhythm feels natural, and you don't sound like you're reciting a script. And yet, for most learners, even after years of studying grammar and vocabulary, that relaxed, friendly tone feels just out of reach. Why is that? And more importantly, how did I finally touch it? Because I did. And today I'm going to walk you through that journey, not just with techniques, but with the real, messy, emotional truth behind it. At the beginning, my English didn't sound like something a person would say in a cafe or while laughing with a friend. It sounded like an exercise being graded, and every time I opened my mouth, I could almost hear an invisible red pen scratching in the background. I drilled those tidy textbook exchanges. Hello, how are you? I am fine, thank you. And you? And felt strangely secure, until I tried them on living, breathing people, and the illusion collapsed. The first time a classmate answered me at full speed, I froze. She said something like, "Good, you?" But with 3 extra words, a laugh, and a rising, falling rhythm that didn't match anything I'd memorized. In that moment, I realized I wasn't really speaking. I was performing a script. Performance can earn a grade. Conversation asks you to join a moment. And joining terrified me because joining meant letting go of perfection. I hid behind grammar the way some people hide behind sunglasses, safe, distant, unreadable. But people don't lean in toward perfect walls. They lean in toward voices that wobble, react, laugh, get interrupted, start again. That gap between correct and conversational became my obsession. I replayed recordings of native speakers and heard things class never trained. Contractions melting words together, soft support sounds. Yeah, right. Half sentences that still made sense because tone carried unfinished meaning. Laughter sliding across ideas. Repeated words that bought thinking time. None of that lived in my grammar workbook, yet all of it lived in real talk. So I started copying energy instead of only copying structure. If a speaker rushed on an excited story, I rushed with them. If they dropped their voice to share something personal, I tried the drop. If they stretched a vowel to hold attention, I stretched mine and laughed at the weirdness in the mirror. Little by little, my mouth stopped locking up. Emotion sat at the center of everything. When I spoke English with fear, fear of mistakes, fear of judgment, my jaw tightened, my vowels shrank, my pitch flattened into safety. Yet conversational English thrives on melody. Surprise lifts, doubt lengthens, agreement hums, storytelling bends, speeds, slows. I practiced emotion alone, yes, embarrassing. I took one short line, I didn't expect that, and performed it shocked, annoyed, amused, bored, sarcastic, delighted. I recorded myself, played it back, cringed, did it again. Somewhere in the repetition, my muscles learned they were allowed to move. A turning point came in a bakery line. I was rehearsing a formal request. "Excuse me, could I please have one whole wheat loaf sliced, if that is possible?" Behind me, someone groaned about Mondays. Without planning, I laughed and said, "Yeah, long morning." It tumbled out unedited. No textbook helmet. She laughed back. "Tell me about it." And just like that, we were two tired humans, not a student and a grammar test. My order after that was clumsy, but I walked out buzzing because for 15 seconds my English had reacted instead of recited. I chased that feeling. I noticed when I stiffened. New people, cameras, formal offices, and when I relaxed, friends, chat threads, late-night voice notes. I began recording messy monologues while cooking or walking. Instead of circling grammar errors, I listened for energy. Did I sound engaged? Did my pitch move? Did I respond to my own ideas? I shadowed short clips of ordinary speakers, vloggers, interview guests, comedians telling quick stories, because everyday tone lives there. I would pause, repeat with their rhythm, even copy breaths. Yes, I miscopied plenty. Yes, I sounded ridiculous. Yes, it worked. Progress was wild and uneven. Some days everything clicked, and I flowed for minutes. Other days I sank back into stiff, safe sentences and wanted to quit. When that happened, I reminded myself why this mattered. I didn't want to pass in English. I wanted to show up in English. The funny, impatient, curious, sometimes dramatic version of me my first language friends knew. Conversational tone is identity crossing a border intact. That truth kept me practicing when results were invisible. So if your English feels wooden and you cringe at playback, you are standing where change begins. The distance between classroom English and living English is uncomfortable, but it is also fertile ground. Every awkward pause is soil. Every imperfect attempt is a seed. Keep planting. Growth hides beneath the surface before it shows in sound. This journey, my journey, is what we are exploring in this series. The shift from controlled accuracy to flexible connection, from memorized lines to responsive listening, from fear to presence. In the next part, I'll open the first real door that moved me forward, training my ears before my mouth. Conversational tone is born in listening, the welcome drop of "hey," the soft filler that buys thinking time, the quick repeat that signals empathy, the laugh that releases tension. When I finally tuned my ears to those signals, my own speech began to breathe. We'll dig into that next. I also discovered that conversational tone isn't only sound, it's timing and trust. In my first language, I interrupt friends with quick jokes. In English, I waited too long, afraid to cut in, so conversations rolled past me. Learning when to jump, when to nod, when to echo a keyword, those tiny timings signaled that I was with the speaker. I practiced by replaying short podcast clips and tapping the desk every time one speaker entered. Later, with friends, my body remembered the rhythm, and I found space to glide in without crashing the flow. Linking words mattered too. In textbooks, words sit apart. In real talk, they cling. Gonna, wanna, didya, do you see? Sounds good. The first times I tried them, I overdid it and sounded like a bad movie character. but easing into gentle reductions helped my speech stop tripping over spaces that native speakers never leave. Culture-colored tone as well. In some communities, direct eye contact plus a warm "hey" feels friendly. In others, a lighter nod works better. I watched not just mouths, but faces, hands, shoulders. Conversation lives in the whole person. Once I noticed that, my own English loosened because I wasn't pouring all pressure into words alone. I could smile, shrug, raise eyebrows, and suddenly fewer words carried more meaning. One more confession. I still make mistakes. I still forget words and reach for placeholders. The thing, that little round, what's it called? And guess what? People help. That moment of shared search is human, and human always beats flawless. So if my tone today sounds comfortable, remember it sits on years of awkward recordings, bakery lines, bus rides where I practiced responses in my head, online game chats where I tested slang, and quiet walks where I narrated clouds just to hear myself try. Every bit counted, even the cringy ones. When we continue, I'll show you exactly how I trained listening so speech could finally relax, and we'll build from the ear outward, because conversation begins long before your mouth moves. Take a breath, let go of the red pen in your head, and come with me into the soundscape of everyday English, where real connection grows. See you in the next section. We start with listening tricks you can try even while alone. Truly anywhere. Before I ever felt confident speaking in a conversational tone, I had to confront the truth that my ears were asleep. Not literally, of course, but they were dull, tuned to catch vocabulary and grammar, but not tuned to tone. When native speakers talked, my mind raced to translate, to match words, to understand content. But I missed everything else. I missed the melody of real speech. I missed the pauses that meant, "I'm not done yet," and the rising tone that meant, "I'm joking, go along with me." I missed the emotion behind the words, the hesitation, the excitement, the sarcasm, the warmth. That's when I realized sounding natural starts with listening naturally. And not just any kind of listening, the kind where you turn off the part of your brain that wants to dissect every word, and you start absorbing the music of the language. And music is the perfect word, because conversation is rhythm. It has beats, it has rests, it has highs and lows. I wasn't speaking with a conversational tone because I wasn't hearing it in the right way. I was hearing words. I needed to start hearing people. So I changed how I listened. I didn't just listen for meaning anymore. I listened for mood. I picked a 5-minute podcast clip and replayed it every day for a week, not to understand new vocabulary, but to follow the speaker's emotional path. Where did they speed up? Where did they pause? When did their voice rise in surprise or drop in reflection? Let's talk motivation for a moment, because this journey can be slow. You'll spend days where everything feels wrong. Your voice sounds weird, your words disappear, your sentences fall apart. And in those moments, your mind might whisper, "You'll never sound natural." I've been there. But I'm telling you, that voice is wrong. You can sound natural. Not because you're perfect, but because you're practicing. Every awkward attempt is a step forward. Every time you choose a casual phrase over a formal one, even if it feels odd in your mouth, you're rewiring your brain to speak with people, not just at them. And that's the goal. Here's a little exercise that helped me build this flexibility. Take one simple sentence and rewrite it in 5 casual ways. For example, instead of "I don't know," try "no clue," "beats me," "not sure honestly," "haven't got a clue," or just dunno. Then practice saying each version with different tones: confused, playful, annoyed, relaxed. Record it. Listen back. Do this with 5 new sentences every week. Over time, your instinct will grow. You'll start reaching for the casual version naturally. And once it becomes instinct, that's when you've touched conversational tone, not as a technique, but as a part of your voice. Remember, your goal isn't to sound like someone else. It's to sound like you, in English. You don't have to copy a native speaker's accent, their slang, or their culture. You bring your own color to the conversation. You bring your background, your perspective, your energy. Conversational tone doesn't erase who you are. It amplifies it. It lets people meet the real you without formal filters or stiff delivery. There came a moment, quiet and surprising, when I realized that all the work I had done with tone, rhythm, and vocabulary was still sitting on top of a single, stubborn habit. I was translating. Every sentence I spoke in English began its life in my native language. I didn't even notice it at first. It was so automatic. I'd think of an idea, form it the way I'd say it in my own language, and then try to find the English equivalent. The result? Delays, hesitations, weird word choices, and worst of all, an invisible wall between me and fluency. Because when you're constantly translating, you're not speaking English. You're speaking through English. It's like driving with the handbrake on. You move, but it's slow, clunky, frustrating. And I hated it. I hated that I couldn't just speak. I hated how conversations became calculations. I hated that, deep down, I was afraid to think in English. But that's where the breakthrough started. I admitted it. I wasn't thinking in English. I was surviving in English. And survival mode doesn't lead to fluency. It leads to burnout. So I made a decision, one that felt terrifying at the time. I was going to stop translating. Cold turkey. No more checking with my first language before I spoke. No more rewiring every thought. I was going to think in English, even if it meant sounding like a caveman. Even if I had to use simple words. Even if I messed up. Especially if I messed up. The first few days were brutal. My thoughts felt choppy, broken. I'd start a sentence in English, hit a wall, and just freeze. Words I used to know vanished. I felt like I was starting over. And I wanted to quit. But I had prepared for that. I reminded myself, this is the cost of rewiring your brain. It's not supposed to feel smooth. It's supposed to feel new. I also set a rule. No going back. If I didn't know how to say something in English, I'd find another way. I'd use gestures. I'd describe it. I'd say, the thing for cutting bread, instead of switching languages. And every time I stayed in English, even if it was messy, I felt a tiny surge of power. A voice in my head said, "You did it. You stayed." And then, slowly, things started changing. My thoughts began forming directly in English, not all the time, not perfectly, but more and more. I'd wake up and think, ugh, I'm tired, not estoy cansado, followed by a translation. I'd see a dog on the street and think, he looks happy, instead of converting a phrase from my native language. These weren't big moments. They were tiny, invisible shifts, but each one was a step closer to fluency, and each one made the next step easier. Something else happened too. I started dreaming in English, not every night, but some nights. The first time, I woke up stunned. In the dream, I was having a casual conversation, nothing dramatic, but it was all in English. That blew my mind, because dreams don't lie. You can't force a dream. Your subconscious speaks whatever language feels most natural. So when mine chose English, I knew I was no longer translating. I was living in the language, even when I wasn't awake. Now I won't lie to you, it's not like I flipped a switch and never struggled again. There are still moments when I hear a word in my own language and instinctively want to convert it. But now I catch myself. I smile. I pause. I find another way. That's the muscle I built. Not perfection, but persistence. And here's the truth. Most learners don't hear enough. Fluency doesn't mean you never struggle. It means you keep going in the language even when you struggle. That's what thinking in English is. It's a commitment, a mindset. Let's get practical now. You're probably asking, okay, how do I start? I'll tell you what worked for me. First, I changed my environment. I made English unavoidable. My phone, set to English. My apps, English. My playlists, podcasts, YouTube videos, all in English. I didn't do this to study. I did it to bathe my brain, to make English the background noise of my life. The more I saw and heard it, the more natural it became. The second thing I did was even more powerful. I talked to myself, constantly. I'd walk around my room and narrate my actions out loud. Okay, I need to find my keys. Where did I put them? Maybe on the table? I'd react to things in real time. Wow, that coffee's strong. This weather is insane. I wasn't trying to be clever. I was trying to exist in English. And slowly, that internal monologue, the voice in my head, shifted. Another trick? Journaling. Every night I'd write one page in English, not a big essay, just my thoughts. Today I felt weird. I didn't want to talk to anyone. But then I had ice cream and it helped. Honest, raw, simple, no translating, no grammar police, just me in English. Over time, those pages became my proof. Proof that I could think in English. That I had opinions, emotions, stories in this language. And that was powerful. Because when you can express your truth in another language, that language becomes yours. Now, let's be real. Some days were ugly. I'd sit down to write and nothing would come. Or I'd speak and hate the sound of my own voice. I'd feel stupid, blocked, frustrated, but I kept going. Why? Because I remembered what it felt like to be stuck, to always translate, to never trust myself. I didn't want to live in that cage anymore. I wanted freedom. And freedom meant thinking in English, even if it was messy, especially when it was messy. There's one more thing I need to tell you. Thinking in English doesn't mean abandoning your native language. It doesn't mean forgetting who you are. It means expanding who you are. It means giving yourself more ways to feel, to connect, to express. It means being bilingual not just in speech, but in soul. So when you catch yourself translating, don't panic. Don't criticize. Just pause, smile, and say the next word in English, then the next, and the next. One word at a time, one thought at a time, you're building something extraordinary. When I finally began to think in English, even just in fragments, I felt a powerful shift. But the real test didn't happen in the quiet of my room or the safety of my journal. The true test came when I had to use that inner English voice in the world, in conversations with real people, in unpredictable situations where words move fast and confidence is fragile. And let me be honest with you, it was terrifying. That first moment when someone asked me a simple question in English and I didn't freeze, that felt like winning a gold medal. Because for the longest time, conversations felt like battles. I wasn't just trying to talk. I was trying not to embarrass myself, trying not to forget words, trying not to make a fool of myself. And with all that pressure in my head, how could I ever sound natural? But here's the secret I discovered. Sounding natural doesn't come from perfection. It comes from presence, from being in the moment. And to do that, I had to make a shift, not just in language, but in attitude. I had to stop treating every conversation like an exam. I had to stop rehearsing every sentence in my head before speaking. I had to stop apologizing for my English before I even opened my mouth. That was hard. Because for years, I had learned to approach English conversations with fear. Every time I spoke, I braced for judgment. But the truth is, most people aren't judging. They're listening. They're waiting to connect. And the moment I believed that, I started speaking with less fear and more trust. At first, it felt strange. I wanted to learn something, get results, check progress. But this kind of listening felt passive. It wasn't. It was preparation. It was soaking. It was teaching my subconscious how English breathes, and breath is everything. I began noticing that when speakers inhaled sharply before a point, they were about to make a strong statement. When they exhaled long and slow, they were calming down the conversation. These weren't vocabulary terms, they were clues, and conversational tone lives in those clues. I went further. I started shadowing speakers, not just repeating their words, but mimicking their timing, pitch, volume, even their little verbal tics. Kind of like all those filler words I used to avoid became bridges that made my speech flow instead of stop. I'd listen to one sentence, pause the audio, and repeat it until it felt like I was talking, not reciting. The goal wasn't to copy exactly. It was to train my mouth and ears to move together. And yes, it was weird. I felt ridiculous. I laughed at myself a lot. But behind the laughing, something started to shift. My tongue loosened. My hesitation decreased. And more than anything, my confidence began to grow. Now let me be clear. This didn't happen overnight. There were days when I felt like I was getting worse. I would catch myself sounding flat again, monotone, especially when I was tired or nervous. But I started catching it, and that's key. Before, I didn't notice when I lost tone. Now, I could feel it. That self-awareness was proof that my ears were waking up. You cannot fix what you cannot hear. Once you start hearing the rhythm of real speech, you begin adjusting without trying. That's when conversational tone becomes part of you. Not something you perform, but something you are. One trick that helped me enormously was recording natural English and listening with a specific focus. Not on what did they say, but on how did they say it. I made playlists of casual interviews, podcasts, even YouTube vlogs where the speaker wasn't trying to teach. They were just talking, because that's where the real tone lives. I started noticing patterns. For example, most English speakers raise their tone slightly at the end of a question, but not every question. Sometimes it drops, especially when the question is rhetorical. Phrases like, "You know what I mean," often aren't really questions at all. They're just conversational glue. I noted all of this, not on paper, but mentally, emotionally. I felt the patterns, and the more I listened this way, the more I changed. I began to respond in conversation not by reaching for a sentence I'd memorized, but by matching tone. If someone told a funny story with exaggerated intonation, I answered with playful energy, even if my grammar wasn't perfect. If someone whispered something serious, I slowed down and softened my voice in reply. I wasn't focused on my vocabulary list. I was focused on matching the vibe, and that vibe carried me into real connection. Motivational moment here, because I need you to hear this. Conversational tone is not about sounding perfectly native. It's about sounding fully human. It's about reaching the other person, not impressing them. If your goal is to communicate, connect, and belong, then mastering tone is more powerful than memorizing 500 verbs, because people won't remember your perfect grammar, but they will remember how you made them feel. And tone creates feeling. There's also something beautiful that happens when you master this. You begin to hear yourself differently. When you play back your own voice and hear not just correct words, but rhythm, warmth, personality, you start to fall in love with your English. And that love, that pride, becomes fuel. You want to keep going. You want to keep improving. You want to speak more, try more, live more in English. To wrap up this part, let me leave you with something simple to do today. Find a short clip, 2 minutes or less, of someone speaking casually. A vlog, a podcast, a street interview. Listen to it 10 times. Don't write anything down, just listen. Focus only on how they say things, their speed, their pauses, their pitch. Then close your eyes and try to imitate one full sentence. Tone, rhythm, mood. Do this every day for a week. Don't rush it. Don't judge it. Just absorb. This is how I started. This is how anyone starts. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. And it will be, if you keep going. When I reached the stage where my ears had finally tuned into the melody of conversational English, I thought the hardest part was over. I could now hear the dips and rises in people's voices. I understood that a sentence wasn't just about what was being said, but how it was being delivered. That alone brought a noticeable shift in how I spoke. But then came the next challenge, and it was a big one. I was still choosing the wrong words. Not wrong as in incorrect, but wrong as in stiff, unnatural, overly formal. I sounded rehearsed. Even though my tone had improved, my word choices felt too clean, too textbook. That's when I realized tone and vocabulary must match. You can't speak casually and still use phrases like, according to my understanding, it appears evident that. You'd sound like someone trying to give a TED talk about tying their shoelaces. And so the next level of conversational tone demanded a new focus, learning the words people actually use in real life. I started noticing how people expressed simple things with color and warmth. For example, instead of saying, "I am very tired today," they'd say, "Man, I'm so beat." Instead of, "I have no time," they'd throw out, "I'm swamped." These weren't just cute phrases. They sounded like speech. They carried energy, emotion, familiarity. So I asked myself, why wasn't I using these words? I knew what they meant, kind of, but I didn't own them. And that's key. Until a phrase becomes yours, until you can pull it out without digging, you won't speak naturally. So I went on a mission. I collected natural phrases, not a huge list, but a handful at a time. I didn't just memorize them. I practiced them like lines in a play, acting out different situations. I'd say, "I'm beat," in an exhausted voice. "I'm swamped," while walking quickly through the hallway. "No worries," with a smile. I didn't just learn expressions. I lived them. Something amazing happened. These casual expressions started replacing my old stiff patterns. Instead of saying, "I did not understand what you said," I'd say, "Wait, what was that?" Instead of, "I agree with your opinion," I'd say, "Totally." Every time I used a real-world expression, something clicked. People reacted differently. They leaned in more. They laughed more. They responded in a way that said, "You're one of us now." It wasn't about copying slang to sound cool. It was about sounding real, like a person who lives in the language, not just around it. Of course, I made mistakes. There were moments I misused a phrase or used something too casual in the wrong setting. But here's the thing. No one laughed at me. No one kicked me out of the conversation. The worst that happened was a little confusion, or someone gently rephrasing. And every one of those moments became a new learning layer. You learn more from one awkward oops than from 50 grammar exercises. The mistake that once embarrassed you becomes the phrase you never forget. So I stopped fearing those moments. I welcomed them. I let myself sound silly sometimes, because silly is human, and conversational English is human. It's full of false starts, filler words, broken grammar, repetition, and yet it connects people beautifully. I also realized that conversational tone isn't just what you say, it's what you leave out. In formal writing, you explain everything. In conversation, you drop words, use gestures, rely on shared understanding. Saying, "You coming?" instead of "Are you coming?" isn't lazy. It's natural, it's efficient, and it makes you sound like you belong. So I started allowing myself to skip things, to say, "let me see," instead of "let me see," to say, "gimme a sec," without guilt. At first, it felt like cheating, but the more I listened, the more I realized this is how people talk. Every language has a relaxed version, and you're not a worse speaker for using it. In fact, it's proof that you're in tune with the real rhythm of the language. Here's something that might surprise you. Sounding conversational actually takes more awareness, not less. You're not just throwing words around. You're adjusting based on mood, speed, familiarity, and context. You might say, "Hey, what's up?" to a friend, but "Hi there, how's it going?" to a coworker. You shift, you flex. That's the beauty of it. Conversational tone is a dance, not a script. You listen, you mirror, you respond, you play with the language. And that's the magic word: play. The moment I stopped treating English like a job and started treating it like play, everything changed. I played with phrases, I played with tone. I even played with accents sometimes, just to feel the words differently in my mouth. That curiosity made learning joyful. And when learning feels good, progress comes faster. Of course, it didn't happen overnight. I started small. I made myself have one tiny interaction in English every day. It didn't matter if it was a short greeting to a store clerk or a quick message to a language partner online. The goal wasn't to be perfect. It was to connect. Even a "hey, how's it going?" was a win. These mini conversations became my training ground. I practiced being present, even when I stumbled. I practiced keeping eye contact, using hand gestures, smiling when I didn't know a word. And every time I got through one of these moments, I grew stronger. One of the most powerful things I learned during this phase was the importance of pauses. I used to think fluency meant speaking quickly, but real conversation, natural, relaxed, human conversation, has pauses. It has silence. It has thinking time. Native speakers do it too. They stop mid-sentence, say, restart, laugh at themselves. I gave myself permission to do the same. When I forgot a word, I didn't panic. I paused. I said, "Wait, what's the word?" Or, the thing that, and people helped me. They filled in the blank. They waited. They smiled. And in that moment, I realized something huge. Conversation is not a performance. It's a collaboration. Another mindset shift that helped me was this. I stopped chasing correct and started chasing connection. If I said, "I go to shopping yesterday," the grammar police in my head screamed. But the person I was talking to, they got it. They nodded. They answered. That was the goal. Real communication. So I let go of the obsession with accuracy. I stopped correcting myself in real time. I trusted that I'd improve with practice, but I refused to interrupt my flow just to fix a verb tense. That one decision changed everything. It allowed me to stay in the conversation even when I messed up. And staying in it, that's how you build fluency. Something else I started doing during this stage was reflecting on my conversations. Not judging, just noticing. I'd ask myself afterward, what went well? Where did I freeze? What word did I wish I had known? Then I'd write that word down, or look it up, or practice that situation again. I wasn't trying to analyze myself like a critic. I was being kind, like a coach. I celebrated every tiny win. Hey, I asked someone for directions and they understood me. I told a joke and someone laughed. These moments were gold. They were signs that I was evolving, not just as a speaker, but as a communicator. Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me earlier. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to keep going despite the fear. I was still nervous in many of those conversations. My heart raced, my hands sweated, but I spoke anyway, and every time I did, the fear lost a little power. So if you're waiting for the fear to go away before you speak, you'll be waiting forever. Speak with the fear. Walk through it. That's how you build real, lasting confidence. During this time, I also discovered the power of mirroring. I'd watch videos of people speaking naturally, vlogs, interviews, sitcoms, and I'd repeat after them. Not just the words, but the tone, the facial expressions, the pauses, the laughter. I wasn't just learning English, I was learning how to live in it. I'd pick a short clip, maybe 10 or 20 seconds, and mimic it line by line. Sometimes I'd record myself and compare. Not to criticize, but to notice, to improve. This practice was incredibly powerful, because the more I felt the language in my body, the rhythm, the gestures, the more confident I became when speaking with others. Then came one of the biggest milestones of my journey. I stopped avoiding conversations. In the past, I'd shy away. I'd let others speak. I'd stay quiet in group chats, but not anymore. I made a new rule. If I have a chance to speak English, I take it. No matter how small, no matter how awkward. Because every single conversation is practice. Every exchange is a brick in the house of fluency. And so I started saying yes. Yes to language meetups. Yes to voice messages. Yes to spontaneous talks. And sure, I still stumbled. I still made mistakes. But I also laughed more. I connected more. I felt more alive. You know what's beautiful? The moment you stop trying to be a perfect English speaker and just start being you, everything changes. Your voice finds its rhythm. Your words find their way. And people? They respond to the real you, not the flawless you, not the textbook you, but the human you. That's what conversational tone is all about. It's not about being clever. It's about being present, open, honest. And here's the most empowering truth of all. Every great English speaker you admire once stood where you are. Nervous, uncertain, full of self-doubt. They didn't get where they are because they were fearless. They got there because they kept showing up. One awkward conversation at a time. One brave sentence at a time, and so will you. Let's talk about something most English learners never get taught, not in school, not in textbooks, not even in language courses. And yet, it's the one thing that makes your English unforgettable. Emotion. I don't mean just sounding excited or sad. I mean being real, being you. Putting your whole personality into every sentence. Because here's what I discovered. Conversational tone isn't just about vocabulary or grammar. It's about energy. It's about making your listener feel something. And I had to learn that the hard way. See, For a long time, I thought speaking English was just about getting the words right. And technically, I did. I followed the rules. But when I listened to myself, it was dull, empty. It didn't move anyone, because it wasn't me speaking. It was a version of me, polished, nervous, disconnected. That realization hit me like a punch in the gut. I wasn't using English to express myself. I was using it to protect myself. And that had to change. The turning point came during a casual conversation with a friend. We were talking about something completely normal, like movies or food, and she suddenly said, "You're so quiet when you speak English. But when you talk in your language, your eyes light up." I froze. That comment stuck with me for days, because I knew she was right. In my native language, I was animated, expressive. I used my hands. I laughed freely. I interrupted. I teased. I was me. But in English, I was careful, reserved, emotionless. Why? Because I was afraid. Afraid that if I showed too much personality, people would notice my mistakes. Afraid that I'd come off weird. So I hid behind safe words, neutral tones, and it made me invisible. That moment became a turning point. I asked myself a tough question. What's the point of learning English if I can't be myself in it? If I have to shrink just to speak, what kind of fluency is that? So I made a vow. From that day on, I would bring emotion into every sentence. I would speak with my full heart, even if I messed up. I would be bold, expressive, alive. And that's when everything changed. The first step? Giving myself permission. I started small. I allowed myself to exaggerate a little when I talked. "Oh my God, that was amazing," instead of just, "It was good." I let my voice go up and down. I played with sounds. I used facial expressions, and it felt weird at first, like I was pretending. But slowly, that pretend became real. The more I did it, the more natural it felt. My voice came to life. My words started to carry weight. People listened differently. They laughed more, they reacted more. They connected with me more. Because now, I wasn't just speaking English. I was speaking through English. One of the most powerful exercises I practiced was reading emotional texts out loud. I'd find movie scripts, song lyrics, even emotional blog posts. And I'd perform them. I'd act. Not for an audience, but for me. I'd pretend I was angry or heartbroken or overjoyed. I wasn't just reading, I was feeling. I let my voice crack. I let the tears come. I let the laughter burst out. And suddenly, English wasn't a tool anymore. It was an instrument. And I was learning to play it with soul. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to go deeper. I started telling stories, real ones, from my life. I'd sit in front of a mirror and talk about the time I failed a test, or the time I lost a friend, or the time someone surprised me with kindness. And I'd tell it in English, not just the facts, but the feelings. I was so embarrassed. I wanted to disappear. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would explode. I laughed so hard I couldn't breathe. These stories weren't perfect, but they were mine. And every time I told one, I felt stronger. Because I wasn't just practicing language, I was reclaiming my identity. And here's the thing that shocked me. When I started using emotion, people stopped noticing my mistakes. They didn't care if I said a word wrong. They were listening. They were focused on my feelings, my story, my truth. That's when I realized something beautiful. People don't connect to perfect English. They connect to honest English, to human English. And you already have that inside you. You don't need more grammar to be expressive. You just need courage. The courage to feel, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That courage paid off. One day, I was in a group conversation with native speakers. I was telling a story about a funny misunderstanding I had at the airport. As I spoke, I started acting it out, doing voices, making faces, using big hand gestures. Everyone was laughing. No one interrupted. No one corrected me. They were completely with me. And when I finished, one guy said, "Man, your English is awesome." I laughed, because my grammar hadn't been perfect, but my connection had been, and that was enough. So how do you build that emotional tone? You practice it deliberately. You stop trying to sound correct and start trying to sound real. You read out loud like you're telling a secret. You speak like you're talking to your best friend. You use words that carry you inside them. And you stop hiding. You let your personality come through. If you're funny, be funny. If you're serious, be serious. If you're dramatic, be dramatic. Let your English be a reflection of your soul. There's one more exercise that changed my life, and I want you to try it. Every day, record yourself talking about how you feel. Just 1 minute. Nothing fancy. Maybe you say, "Today I'm tired. I had a long day, but I'm proud of myself because I didn't give up." Say it with feeling. Say it like it matters. Then listen back. Don't criticize. Just notice. Over time, you'll hear something amazing. Your voice becoming more natural. Your words flowing with warmth. Your tone matching your heart. I want to remind you of something very important. Emotion is not a weakness. It's your superpower. It's what makes your English yours. So if you've been speaking like a robot, it's time to reboot, to bring your language back to life, to stop being just correct and start being authentic. Because in the end, English is not just a skill, it's a stage, a canvas, a voice. And that voice deserves to be heard, not just for the words you say, but for the life you pour into them. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be present. That's what makes people listen. That's what makes you unforgettable. When I finally discovered the rhythm of English, it felt like unlocking a whole new layer of the language. Before that, everything I said sounded stiff, even to my own ears. It was like I was reading a list of instructions instead of having a conversation. I had the words, I had the grammar, but there was no flow, no rise and fall, no bounce, no beat. And honestly, it frustrated me. Because when I listened to native speakers, even when they were just chatting about the weather or weekend plans, their speech moved. It had melody. It had a heartbeat. I remember thinking, why does my English sound so flat, while theirs sounds like music? That question haunted me. But it also pushed me into one of the most transformative parts of my journey toward a conversational tone. learning the rhythm of English. You see, every language has its own music. In my native language, the stress might fall evenly, or maybe the pitch stays mostly the same. But English? English is a stress-timed language. That means certain syllables are emphasized while others are swallowed or glided over. It creates this natural pulse like a drumbeat that runs underneath every sentence. And if you don't ride that beat, your speech feels unnatural, no matter how perfect your grammar is. That was the realization that changed everything for me. I didn't just need to know English, I needed to feel it. So I started listening differently. I stopped focusing only on vocabulary or sentence structure and began tuning into the sound of English. I listened to how people stretched some words and clipped others. I noticed how their tone went up at the end of a question and dropped down when they made a statement. I heard how contractions like I'm, your, or she's made their speech smoother and more fluid, and I started mimicking it, not with pen and paper, with my voice, with my body. I would close my eyes, listen to a native speaker, and repeat after them, matching their rhythm, their stress, their pauses. It was like learning to dance. At first I was off beat. I stumbled. But the more I practiced, the more my English started to move. One of the most powerful tools I used during this phase was shadowing. It's simple but incredibly effective. I'd play a short audio clip, maybe 10 or 15 seconds, pause it, and repeat exactly what I heard, trying to match the speaker's rhythm and intonation. Then I'd do it again and again, until I could say the whole thing smoothly. And let me tell you, it felt amazing. Because suddenly, my English wasn't just correct. It was alive. It had energy. It had emotion. It had that magic touch I had been chasing. There was one moment I'll never forget. I was watching an interview with a famous actor, someone with a very relaxed conversational style. I remember how casually he spoke, how naturally his words flowed like a stream. I picked a small part of that interview and shadowed it for days. I practiced it in front of a mirror. I recorded myself. And then one day, while talking to a friend, I used a similar phrase in the same rhythm, and she stopped and said, "Wow, that sounded so natural." I can't describe how powerful that moment was. It wasn't just about sounding native. It was about belonging, about finally feeling like I could speak English in a way that felt comfortable, confident, me. But rhythm isn't just about stress and intonation. It's also about pace. And this was a tough one for me, because I thought fluent English meant fast English. So I rushed my words. I tried to speak quickly to sound more advanced, but it backfired. I stumbled, I slurred, I lost confidence. Then I started listening more carefully to how fluent speakers actually talk. And guess what? They don't speak fast all the time. They breathe. They pause. They take their time. That was a revelation. Fluency isn't speed, it's control. It's knowing when to slow down, when to emphasize, when to pause for effect. So I started doing the same. I gave myself permission to slow down, to breathe between sentences, to speak with intention. And suddenly, my words carried weight. My listeners leaned in. because I wasn't just speaking fast, I was speaking well. Another thing that helped me embrace rhythm was music. Yes, actual music. I started listening to English songs, not just for entertainment, but for learning. I'd print out the lyrics, sing along, study how the words were stretched or shortened to fit the beat. And I realized songs are a goldmine for rhythm. They teach you stress patterns, intonation, emotional delivery, all wrapped in melody. I remember one song that became my personal anthem. I sang it every day until I could feel the rhythm without thinking. And when I spoke after that, I noticed my speech was smoother, more confident, more musical. It was like I had tuned my voice to the right frequency. Reading aloud also became part of my rhythm training. But not just reading like I was in school. I'd read like I was performing, like I was telling a story to an audience. I'd pick a page from a novel, a script, a blog post, anything with natural conversational language, and I'd read it out loud with full expression. I'd exaggerate the rhythm, stress the important words, let my voice rise and fall, and slowly, that performance practice leaked into my real conversations. I didn't sound robotic anymore. I sounded alive. There were still moments, of course, when I slipped back into my old habits, especially when I was tired or nervous. But the difference was, now I noticed. I could feel when my speech became flat, and I could fix it. Because rhythm wasn't just something I copied. It had become part of me. Like muscle memory, like dancing, like a song I knew by heart. The most beautiful part? Rhythm helped me connect emotionally too. When you speak with rhythm, your words become more expressive, more relatable. People feel what you say. And that's what makes conversation truly powerful. It's not about impressing people with your vocabulary. It's about moving them with your voice. And you can do this. Yes, you. No matter where you are on your English journey, no matter how shy you feel. Rhythm is learnable. It's not a talent. It's a skill. And every time you listen, mimic, repeat, and play with sound, you're building that skill. So start small. Pick a phrase you love, a song lyric, a movie line, a quote from your favorite book. Say it out loud, then say it again with rhythm. Feel the music in the words. Let them dance off your tongue. Because that's what English is. It's not just a language, it's a living rhythm, a heartbeat you can step into. And once you find your rhythm, everything else starts to fall into place. If there's one thing that holds most learners back from ever sounding truly conversational in English, it's fear. The fear of saying the wrong thing, the fear of sounding silly, the fear of being judged. It's like a shadow that follows every word, every sentence, every pause. I know it well, because I carried that fear for years, even when I had the vocabulary, even when I understood grammar rules, even when I knew what I wanted to say. The moment I opened my mouth, that fear would creep in and tighten my chest. I'd hesitate. I'd second guess. I'd water down my personality just to avoid sounding wrong. And do you know what that did to my English? It made it small, careful, bland. It robbed my voice of its strength. And if you felt that same pressure, if your voice shrinks when you speak English, I want you to know something from the bottom of my heart. You are not alone. But you don't have to stay there. Fear is tricky. It wears a mask of perfectionism. It whispers, "Don't speak unless you're sure. Don't try that new phrase. You might say it wrong. What if they laugh? What if they don't understand you?" And so, you retreat. You say only what you're 100% certain about. You avoid risks. You nod instead of asking questions. You say yes even when you want to say, "Wait, I don't understand." But here's the truth. Conversational tone lives on the other side of fear. You can't reach it by playing it safe. You can't reach it by trying to be perfect. You reach it by stepping into the unknown, by embracing your humanity, by accepting that you will make mistakes, and choosing to speak anyway. I remember a time when I was in a group conversation, and I wanted to say, "I got a haircut yesterday," but I panicked. I couldn't remember if it was got or have gotten or was cut. My mind froze, and instead of saying anything, I just smiled and stayed quiet. That silence haunted me for days, not because the sentence was important, but because I had let fear silence me. And that moment became a turning point. I told myself, never again. I'd rather speak and be wrong than stay silent and be invisible. So I started speaking imperfectly on purpose. I pushed myself into conversations where I knew I'd struggle. I let myself say things that weren't polished. I stopped mid-sentence and laughed when I couldn't find a word. And something incredible happened. People didn't laugh at me. They leaned in, they helped, they connected with me. Because I was real, vulnerable, and human. And that humanity, that willingness to be seen, is the heart of conversational tone. Let me tell you something powerful. Every mistake you make is a gift. It's proof that you're trying, that you're growing, that you're stepping outside your comfort zone. I began collecting my mistakes like souvenirs. I'd write them down in a notebook, not to punish myself, but to celebrate them. I'd write, "Said funny instead of fun. They laughed anyway." Or, "Mixed up borrow and lend, but they understood." And over time, those little slips became stories, lessons. They built my confidence, not my shame. You know what else helped me let go of fear? Watching children learn language. They speak with no filter. They mess up constantly, but they don't stop. They point, guess, invent words, and laugh at their own confusion. And because they try, they grow fast. I wanted that bravery. So I started talking like a child, not in vocabulary, but in spirit. I allowed myself to play, to be curious, to try without pressure. That mindset freed me. It made English feel fun again. And that fun started showing up in my tone, my expressions, my voice. There was a moment I'll never forget. I was speaking to a native English speaker, and I completely botched a sentence. I can't even remember what I was trying to say. I think I used the wrong tense and forgot a word. I stopped and said, "Wait, that sounded terrible," and we both laughed. Then I tried again, more relaxed this time, and that version sounded much better. That laugh broke the tension. It reminded me that mistakes aren't the end. They're just part of the music. And that's the key. Instead of fearing mistakes, use them. Let them be stepping stones. Let them be proof that you are alive in the language. Another thing I want you to hear loud and clear: nobody speaks perfectly all the time, not even native speakers. They pause, they say and they repeat themselves, they mess up grammar, and yet they're fluent, because fluency isn't about perfection, it's about flow. It's about keeping the conversation going, even when your words aren't perfect. And once I realized that, I stopped trying to sound flawless. I started focusing on connection, on getting my message across, on enjoying the exchange. And suddenly, conversations felt lighter, easier, more meaningful. I also learned to be honest about my level. If I didn't know a word, I'd say, "I'm not sure how to say this in English, but it's like," and then I'd describe it. And people understood. Sometimes they even helped me find the word. Those moments created real connection, because they weren't performances. They were conversations, and that honesty made me feel strong, not weak, because I was showing up as I am, not as someone pretending to be perfect. You might be wondering, what if people do judge me? What if someone laughs or rolls their eyes? It happens. It's painful. But I want to tell you something from the deepest part of my experience. That judgment is never about you. It's about them, their impatience, their ignorance, their lack of empathy. Don't give their opinions power over your voice. The world needs your voice, your accent, your mistakes, your truth. Because someone out there will listen to you and feel less alone. Someone will hear you and think, if they can do it, maybe I can too. That's the magic of speaking despite fear. It inspires others, it creates community, it shows courage, and you have that courage, even if it's buried right now, even if your heart races when you speak, even if your voice trembles. That fear means you care, and that care is the seed of greatness. So here's what I want you to do today. Speak. Speak even if it's messy. Speak even if you forget a word. Speak even if you have to laugh through your nerves. Speak like your voice matters, because it does. Every time you speak, you grow. Every mistake you make is a step toward fluency. Every moment you face your fear, you reclaim your power. Conversational tone isn't about sounding cool or casual. It's about sounding human. And humans are imperfect, beautifully, brilliantly imperfect. So don't wait until your English is ready. Don't wait until you know all the words. Start now. Speak now. With all your fear, with all your heart, with all your messy, magical courage. There came a moment in my journey where I realized mimicking others was only the beginning. It helped me gain rhythm, gave me confidence, and pulled me out of the shell I had built around my voice. But something still felt missing. I was speaking more fluently now. My words were smoother, my sentences more natural. Yet when I listened to myself, I didn't always recognize myself. I sounded like someone else, a patchwork of voices from podcasts, movies, and interviews. And while that had helped me learn, it wasn't me. That's when I began to chase something deeper, something more honest. I wanted my own voice in English. I didn't just want to speak fluently. I wanted to speak authentically, and that meant developing a personal style, a way of expressing myself that felt real, natural, and uniquely mine. Let me tell you something powerful. You don't need to sound like a native speaker. You don't need to lose your accent or adopt someone else's expressions. Your goal isn't imitation. It's integration. You're not replacing your voice. You're expanding it. Your personal tone in English should be an extension of who you already are in your first language, your humor, your rhythm, your passion, your quiet strength. All of it can live in English too, if you give it permission. So I started listening to myself more. I recorded my voice and played it back, not to criticize, but to connect. I asked myself, does this sound like me? And sometimes the answer was no. Sometimes I was forcing expressions that didn't feel natural. I was using phrases just because I had heard someone else use them, not because they truly fit me. And that was okay, because it helped me reflect. It helped me peel back the layers of imitation and begin crafting something honest. I began paying attention to the kind of words I enjoyed using. Some people speak with poetic language. Others are straight to the point. I realized I loved storytelling. I loved painting pictures with my words, adding color and emotion. So I leaned into that. I didn't just say, it was a bad day. I'd say, it felt like the sky had fallen into my shoes. That was my style. A little dramatic, a little playful, but it was me. And once I stopped trying to sound correct and started trying to sound true, everything changed. Finding your voice also means knowing what not to say. There were phrases I had memorized from movies that didn't fit my personality at all. Things like, whatever man, or that's lit. I tried using them, and they felt fake, so I let them go. Not because they were wrong, but because they weren't mine. Your personal style comes from choices, what you keep, what you let go, and what you create. And guess what? You can mix things. You can bring the spirit of your native language into English. Maybe there's a way you joke in your language, a rhythm or a phrase that you can carry into English with a little twist. I did that all the time. I'd translate my thoughts in a way that preserved their soul, even if the structure was new. That's how your unique voice starts to take shape. You're not just learning English, you're shaping it to fit your identity. I remember a friend once told me, when you speak English now, it feels like I'm really hearing you, not a version of you. That moment meant everything, because that's what we're all searching for. Not just acceptance, not just fluency, but recognition. The feeling that our words reflect who we are, that we're not lost in translation, but found in it. One technique that helped me shape my style was journaling in English. I'd write about my day, my thoughts, my emotions. No pressure, no grammar check, just me. And over time, patterns emerged. Words I loved using. Sentences that sounded like my internal voice. That became the blueprint for my spoken style. Because the more you write like yourself, the easier it becomes to speak like yourself. I also embraced my accent. I used to feel ashamed of it, like it was a stain on my English. But now I see it differently. My accent is a part of my history. It carries my roots. It tells a story. And in a world full of voices, your voice matters. Fluency with an accent is still fluency. Expression with an accent is still powerful. I stopped trying to hide mine and started owning it. And the moment I did, I felt free. I wasn't trying to fit in anymore. I was standing out proudly. Another powerful shift happened when I stopped chasing big, fancy words and started focusing on clarity and connection. I used to think that sounding smart meant using long sentences and complex vocabulary, but in reality, the most powerful speakers are often the simplest. They speak from the heart. They choose clarity over complexity, and people listen. That became my goal, not to impress, but to connect. I started practicing with people I trusted, friends, mentors, conversation partners. I'd tell them, I'm working on speaking more like myself in English. And they supported me. They gave me feedback. They helped me notice when I sounded natural and when I didn't. That support made all the difference, because finding your voice isn't a solo journey. It's something you build in connection with others. You'll know when you've found your style, not because someone tells you, but because it feels right. Because when you speak, it's not exhausting. It's energizing. It's not about performing anymore. It's about being. That's what conversational tone really is. It's not a skill you copy from others. It's a voice you reclaim for yourself. And I want you to know this. Your voice in English is waiting. It's there, beneath the rules, beneath the fear, beneath the echoes of other people's accents. It's quiet right now, maybe, but it's alive. And every time you speak from your heart, every time you tell a story, ask a question, share a laugh, you bring that voice closer to the surface. So let go of the idea that you have to sound like someone else. Let go of the pressure to be perfect. Start asking yourself, what do I really want to say? What feels true to me? That's where your style begins. And remember, fluency is not the final goal. Freedom is. The freedom to be yourself in another language. The freedom to show up fully, to speak with your accent, your stories, your rhythm, your truth. That's the voice the world needs. That's the voice only you can bring. When I look back at the journey, every pause, every misstep, every moment I doubted myself, I feel something powerful rising inside me. Not shame, not regret, but pride. Immense pride. Because the truth is, I didn't just learn a new language. I didn't just improve my English. I unlocked a new part of myself. A part that was once afraid to speak, afraid to be wrong, afraid to be seen. And now, that part has become my strength. My voice, once quiet, once hesitant, is now something I carry with confidence. And if you've walked with me through this story, if you've seen yourself in these words, then I need you to hear this. You can do the same. You already have everything you need inside you. The rest is just unlocking it. Remember how this began? I was trapped in the structure, stuck in translation, thinking in my first language, struggling to make English fit around it. That disconnect made everything feel unnatural, mechanical. But now, my thoughts flow more freely, not because I memorized more, not because I became perfect, but because I let go of the pressure. I stopped chasing native-level fluency like it was the only goal. and I started chasing realness, honesty, connection. That shift changed everything. When I learned to think in English, not just translate, I started to feel the language. I saw the humor, the rhythm, the beauty. It stopped being a foreign object. It became a part of me. That took time and patience, but it happened, and it will happen for you too. There's no magic switch. It's a slow unfolding, but every step you take gets you closer. And then came the tone, learning to sound natural. I used to read from a mental script, afraid to color outside the lines. But slowly, I allowed my personality to come through. I cracked jokes, shared stories, laughed at myself. I stopped treating English like a performance. I started treating it like a playground. And the more I played, the more alive it became. Of course, there were hard days. Days when I thought I was going backward, when my brain froze mid-sentence, when someone misunderstood me and I felt small. But I kept going, because I realized progress isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, invisible. You don't notice it until one day you catch yourself thinking in English without trying, or telling a story and watching people hang on your every word. That's how it comes. Quietly at first, then all at once. And somewhere along the way, I found my own voice. I stopped copying. I started creating. My tone became mine, not borrowed, not imitated, but true. And that, more than anything, made me feel like I belonged. Not because I sounded like everyone else, but because I sounded like me, even in a second language. Let me tell you what that kind of freedom feels like. It feels like ordering coffee and chatting with the barista. Not rehearsed, just natural. It feels like calling a friend and venting about your day in English without worrying if your grammar is perfect. It feels like laughing at your own mistakes and realizing, I'm still understood. I'm still seen. I'm still enough. This isn't just a language skill. This is your identity expanding. This is you becoming more adaptable, more expressive, more open. Every time you push through fear, every time you speak when it's hard, you're growing in ways that go beyond vocabulary. You're becoming someone who can show up in new spaces, who can connect across cultures, who can speak with heart, no matter the language. If you're still in the early stages, if your words still come out stiff or slow or heavy, I want you to pause and breathe. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are becoming. And becoming takes time. Don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle. Don't measure your worth by how fluent you are. Measure it by how brave you are, by how often you show up, by how deeply you want to grow. Here's what I hope you remember most from this journey. You don't need permission to speak like yourself. You don't need to wait until you're perfect to be proud. You don't need to erase your accent or your background to be powerful. Your voice matters as it is, full of color, full of soul, full of story. Speak with that voice. Shape it, yes. Train it, yes. But never silence it. Because someone out there needs to hear you. Someone needs your story, your perspective, your honesty. And when you speak, even if your hands shake, even if your voice breaks, you are doing something extraordinary. You are building a bridge between worlds. You are becoming more than bilingual. You are becoming boundless. And let's not forget the most beautiful part of conversational tone. It's never truly finished. Just like you, it evolves. You'll continue to discover new expressions, new rhythms, new parts of yourself. Some days your voice will feel strong, other days it will feel fragile. That's okay. That's human. What matters is that you keep using it, keep trusting it. I'm not the same person I was when I first started learning English. That version of me, so careful, so cautious, so unsure, is still a part of me. But now I speak with heart, with humor, with freedom. And that change didn't come from a textbook. It came from living the language. It came from choosing to be seen again and again, even when it was hard. So I'll leave you with this. Your conversational tone isn't just a technique. It's a reflection of your courage. It's your story told in a new voice. It's your soul speaking through a new rhythm. And it belongs to you. Thank you for walking this path with me. Thank you for listening, for believing, for trying. You've already taken the most important step. You've chosen to grow. Now, take the next one. Speak, mess up, laugh, learn, and keep going. Because the world doesn't need perfect speakers. It needs real ones. And the realest voice you can offer is your own. In all its honesty, in all its depth, in all its glory. So speak on, my friend, loudly, boldly, and above all, authentically.